I give you Shockwave. I always loved Shockwave. I was jealous because one of the kids on the bus had the Shockwave transformer, and it was awesome because it was like a laser gun. Megatron was like an old Ruger, I think. But the Shockwave gun. That's what DK Metcalf is for sure. It is the Audible Live. We're going to talk about Transformers, or we're going to talk to Dr. Jene Bramel. Unfortunately, Doc, we only got you for 15 minutes tonight. Everyone run around doing their thing. So we thank you very much for your time. Let's jump right into this situation as we'll get you on board talking about DeAndre Swift. What's the word on the Lions running back, Dr. Gene?
I think we're still waiting to see whether or not he's going to go or not. I think they're probably going to try to get him back, but we'll see how it goes. What we do know is that if he does play, he's probably not in enough condition to take a full role. Daryl Bevel has told us that for a couple of weeks now, so that's what I expect. I think they're hoping to have him back. I'd like to see him get in the third practice on Friday, and if that's the case, they'll let him go, but probably 10 to 15 touches is what you're going to see.
Doc, how concerned should we be about Mike Evans' hamstring?
I'd be more concerned about Evans if we'd seen him miss games in the past with injuries like this. And he was talking to the media today, praising how tough Chris Godwin was playing through some of his injuries that Godwin has dealt this year. There doesn't seem to be any indication locally of concern, but beat writers are saying it's something to watch. So maybe something there, but I don't know that he would have been talking to the media, who really didn't seem to ask him much about the hamstring injury if they weren't preparing him to play. And we've seen Evans in multiple years now not practice much and then play effectively. So that's my expectation. It could change on Friday, but I think he's going to go.
Gene, should Antonio Gibson GMs be worried about him missing multiple weeks, or is it just this week?
Yeah, I think for sure that there's a risk that I don't know that I'd say he's done for the season, but for those of you that are hoping he's going to be available in week 15 or 16, he needs to have a pretty quick recovery. Apparently, his rehab has gone pretty well. Ron Rivera said the last couple of days with the trainers have been better maybe than expected, but he's not practiced the last couple of weeks. Hopefully, what that means is you'll get him back for week 15, but I don't see much chance he goes this week.
All right, Dr. Gene, the Christian McCaffrey thing, are you surprised that he tweaked his quad? It seems like an interesting, kind of tweak. We've been dealing with shoulder and what was it, an ankle at the beginning of the year? So McCaffrey practices Wednesday, tweaks the quad, and now is out this week. What are you thinking there?
Yeah, I think it's just a frustrating season all around for McCaffrey. Both of those injuries were a little bit fluky, with both the high ankle and then the shoulder shortly after coming back. This seems like something that happened in a workout through the bye week, and then they were hoping it was okay, put him through a couple of individual drills, failed to tighten up, and then pulled him from practice. And to have him not practicing on Thursday and for the team to say he's not likely to go tells you that this week is obviously out of the question. And then you're hoping this not going to be a multi-week situation, but I don't think the shoulder and the quad are connected in any way. It doesn't mean he was out of condition. With the shoulder, he should have been able to stay in condition. Just another unfortunate and fluke situation, and hopefully we'll have him back at full strength at some point during the fantasy playoffs. But at this point, with him not being able to go on Thursday, you have to wonder whether or not week 15 is going to be in play for him either.
I'm going to steal Cecil's thunder here. Sorry, Cece. For the degenerate pot stoner from Greeley, Jason, he says he's so excited he forgot the about. He just said, "What the Raiders?" and Jacobs.
Jacobs was interesting. He really felt a little bit nervous about what looked like on video as a high ankle sprain, not thought to be that significant, and not able to return to practice, which is often the case with high ankle sprains last week. And the DNP on Wednesday was a concern, but Vic Tafur of The Athletic was pretty adamant in his report yesterday that he had some sources within the Raiders organization that said that Jacobs, along with a couple of the other players that didn't practice on Wednesday, were fully expected to be able to ramp up their practice time and be ready to go. And I wasn't willing to buy into that until you started to see him do a little bit more in practice. And they put him through individual drills today, and there seems to be some optimism now uniformly around the team that he'll maybe be able to go. I think they have to make sure that he responds well to Thursday's practice. It looks like we're trending in a good direction. Whether or not he's going to be able to get his 20 to 30 touch workload that we'd seen before the injury remains to be seen. But we've seen the Raiders allow players to play without much practice. We've seen Jacobs play through painful situations of the past. Sounds like he sees this game this week as a critical one for Las Vegas, and it is. So another good practice on Friday would probably put him in line for some measure of close to 15 to 20 snaps, if not, or touches rather, if not more than that this week.
Gene, should Tennessee Titans teenage T.O. be someone that we should be worried about with his ankle?
I don't think so. That looked like a low ankle sprain. Those are difficult, but not impossible to play through. So I'm expecting him to go. There's not been a lot of notes around the team, and the injury itself didn't seem to be much of a concern by video. So I think this is going to be a situation where, as they have with his knee and hip at times during the year, give him some practice time off, allow him to get as much treatment as possible, and then allow him to go. So hopefully that'll prove to be the case.
Going around the horn with Dr. Jene Bramel. Just a few minutes left. And Dr. Jene, we appreciate you for checking in tonight. How you feeling about Daniel Jones, buddy?
Good. What the Giants have been telling reporters is that if they really wanted to evaluate him on Thursday, everybody was kind of uniform in praising him for what they were able to see in individual drills today. And from the limited video I was able to see, he looked like he was much more comfortable moving, dropping in the pocket, and planting and throwing than he was in the last game we saw him, where he really couldn't do much in the pocket at all. So I'm anticipating that we're probably going to hear him named the starter if he's able to take some first team reps tomorrow, and he'll be back this week.
Gene, navigate us through DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel, our chances of seeing them this week, what to look forward to, and any general things we've learned about the timing of players coming off of the COVID list, and then usually how long it takes for them to be truly cleared to play.
Yeah, my understanding is that Moore tested positive, which means he's out this week, and assuming that he does well, would be back the following week because it's a 10-day situation, assuming there aren't any prolonged symptoms, and they clear him medically to return. And we've seen some players take much longer, and some players come off at 10 days. And we don't usually get a lot of information until we get closer to the time where they're expected to come off the list to know whether they were not symptomatic, just a little bit of symptoms resolve quickly, or in the cases of a number of players from A.J. Dillon to Trent Brown to Myles Garrett to so many others over the course of the season, where it may take multiple weeks. In Garrett's case, a couple. In Brown's case, a month or more. And then, we're just getting Dillon back after about 6 weeks as well. Curtis Samuel, my understanding is that he was a close contact of DJ Moore's, or one of the other players that tested positive in Carolina. And if that's the case, assuming his tests continue to be negative, those players were positive through the weekend, and they would be able to come off and play again, assuming that the team clears them to do so. So I think we're likely to see Samuel play, but it's going to be week 15 for DJ Moore at the earliest.
Gene, I like to see low seed playoff teams go ahead and upset a lot of these higher seed guys. So for those guys who need a running back, I'm wondering if Ty Johnson is still going to be an option for the Jets, or are we going to be looking at Frank Gore this weekend? What's the update on his concussion?
Yeah, it's interesting. Frank Gore did not practice on Wednesday and was listed as a concussion. Today, he's listed as a DNP, and they added a not injury related diagnosis to that. So you would think that there would have to be some limited individual drills that he would be put through before they'd clear him to have his independent neurologic exam for full clearance for game day. So the tone around the team made it seem like today was just a rest day, which is kind of odd for a player that's recovering for a concussion. So I'm a little bit nervous about Gore being able to go, but with that tone of the writers in New York making you wonder, okay, well, maybe tomorrow we're going to see those limited individual drills, and they know he's asymptomatic at this point, and they're planning on getting him cleared through the weekend. So I think there's still a chance that happens. He's one of the few players that if you get a Wednesday and Thursday DNP, there's enough optimism from the reports that we're seeing to give him at least a chance to play. But I'd consider him questionable at best, and absolutely has to be doing something in Friday's practice to have any chance to go.
Making a couple more rounds, probably one more round with Dr. Jene Bramel here tonight. And you can follow him on Twitter at Jene Bramel. And it's about Todd Gurley and his knee. Dr. Jene, how are you feeling this week with the week one of the fantasy playoffs?
The same. I think what we're going to see from Gurley for the rest of the year is that, they're going to manage his reps as much as possible. They're going to try to, I had a mom come into clinic this week and ask me about that picture.
Holy cow.
Oh boy.
The first time
Just
for a
this
while.
week? Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
This week. So thanks, Five-ish, once again. Like, was that you? Like, yeah, that's me. That only happens once every 2 or 3 years, thankfully. But yeah.
Okay.
Don't Google me out there. That I think he's it's at this point, there's no reason to suspect that it's anything other than a flare of the arthritic knee. It's going to have to be managed in practice. They're going to put him in situations. I think they told us after the game, but this is what you would expect, is that they were going to put him in critical third down situations for his ability to block, for his ability to convert first downs if necessary, and then be used in the red zone. And I think that's what we're likely to see from him unless and until he goes through a full week of practice and they take him off the injury report and we hear that we're able to give him his full workload. And for now, it doesn't look like that's going to be the case this week, but leaves open the possibility for a full Friday practice and things moving on from there. But for now, I think, we're looking in kind of that 8 to 15 touch range, and you hope that he breaks a long run on the opportunities that he has between the 20s, and that maybe he converts a touchdown to support what is very unlikely to be much more than kind of a 40-60 yard week.
Gene, teams have made the playoffs in spite of Ezekiel Elliott. Really looking forward to this matchup against the Bengals. Zeke says it's a contusion, says it's going to be sore, but it's not going to limit me much at all. I'm tough. Is that enough for you to not worry about him this weekend?
Yeah, I think if he's saying that, I feel pretty good about it. One, for certain, if it was a strained calf muscle, you'd have to be concerned if he's not practicing much, whether or not he's going to be effective enough to play, how much you would see Tony Pollard. If it's a bruise and they're allowing him to practice at all, it should not be such a significant injury where you would expect it to tighten up or for them to say, you know what, it's just not likely to go. The consecutive practices on Wednesday and Thursday are a pretty good sign. Again, Zeke this year with that offensive line with Andy Dalton under center is not going to be a 30 touch, 150 yard, multiple touchdown player. It's just not going to happen. But I do think, based on what we heard today, that he's likely to play.
Gene, is James Robinson available in this coming weekend?
I think so. I haven't heard anything from Jacksonville that would make you think that Robinson or Chenault won't be available. Again, another couple of limited practices. The Jaguars have been known to kind of limit some of their key offensive players, and there's not been any indication from the local media that he's not going to be able to go. So I'll be surprised if, maybe questionable. The Jacksonville Jaguars like to list their players questionable. They kind of use it as a proxy for probable in the same way that Detroit and Chicago and a few other teams do. So we may see him listed as questionable tomorrow, but I don't think there's any reason to suspect that he's not going to play.
He is Dr. Jene Bramel, ladies and gentlemen, right here, footballguys.com and the Audible. And of course, I have to have you look at this, Gene, because I used it for most of your show tonight. That was from Brian. I got an email today and it said Duke Bramel. And I was like, okay, Duke Bramel, let me see. And Brian sent me the email and he's, love you guys, love Dr. Gene. And, it's not 5-ish level, but here you go.
I think I'd be more comfortable with a mom asking me about that picture than the previous one.
Duke Jene Bramel, Dr. Jene Bramel, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Gene, go forth, be awesome, as you always are, and we'll talk to you soon, brother.
Indeed. Stay healthy, y'all. Talk soon.
All right, there we have him, Dr. Jene Bramel here, ladies and gentlemen. As we get into the show, Bloom, we have to do a game update.
Yeah, we do.
Not much of a game, but let's talk about it.
Yeah, and by the way, the G.I. Joe imagery just makes me think it's perfect for Dr. Gene's segment, right? Now you know, and knowing is half the battle.
Yes.
So this game should be closer than it is because Cam Akers obviously is playing the game of his life, and the Patriots have just no answer to the Rams running game. And if you were wondering whether McVay was going to have something else up his sleeve, what it was is what we saw in the second half of the year last year, the two tight end sets really bringing the running game back, and there's just no answer. However, you've seen the Patriots get a key interception to set themselves up with a short field. They've actually been in the red zone 3 times and have 3 points. And one of the times there was a disastrous interception where Aaron Donald very smartly legally held Damian Harris on what was going to be a screen pass, and instead it went right to Kenny Young, former Raven, who took it to the house. And that's really the main difference in this game, although the Rams are currently driving down the field behind Cam Akers. And this is tough. This is where those leaps of faith can help you. And if you have anything else in the passing game, you weren't playing anybody in the passing game of the Patriots anyway. In the passing game of the Rams, that's not looking great right now unless there's someone scoring that I'm not seeing. But the Akers question, we got Henry Muto, a fantasy football luminary. I always feel honored when he's in our chat room. And he's in a $500,000 main event, and he's lamenting not playing Cam Akers. But you understand it because we haven't seen the usage pattern of these running backs remain predictable unless it was just some version of a three-headed monster. So, we saw this with J.K. Dobbins was the lead back in week 11, comes back in week 13, still at least gets a touchdown at the end of the game. But you can't trust these coaches with these running backs by committee. Now, if you do survive, and this is why getting the bye is so valuable in your fantasy football playoffs. If you do survive, and you got to see this, you can play him next week against the Jets. So I think that's our main takeaway here. Otherwise, if you thought this was going to be an ugly defensive battle, it basically is. The problem is that Cam Newton threw a pick 6 in the red zone.
Can't do that. Matt, are you surprised this game's gone this way at all?
I'm a little bit, only because the Rams got off to such a hot start. And I think that was probably what it was, is that I'm surprised that the Rams offensive line is opening craters in the Patriots defensive front. And that's really the big deal. Akers is looking progressively better. That's the thing that I would say about him, is that he's doing a better job of finding some cutbacks or that second opportunity, or with situations where he can make a bounce at the line. But part of that is due, in fact, to that the offensive line is just doing a fantastic job, and they're getting great lead blocking as well. And they're mixing it up. They're playing a version of gap and zone with their different plays. And so they're not just being predictable with the same type of thing over and over again. So I'm kind of, it's fun to see that. But to be honest, I mean, I'm not even sure. I think Akers is going to be good, and I like that they're involving him in the receiving game this week. That's a nice development with him, because he was always a very good receiver. But if you ask me, I mean, if we were going to ask about the three best running backs on the field right now, I'd probably put them at Darrell Henderson, Damian Harris, and Cam Akers in that order. But Akers is getting the touches, and he's got the draft capital, and they want to keep going to him and give him more and more live reps to develop, and that's what's happening.
Yeah, I always thought the Darrington Evans talk was always cute, because it's like, just watch Cam Akers. If you want to see a better version of Darrington Evans, just watch Cam Akers, please, for the love of God.
Yeah, there's raw and there's medium rare, and Cam Akers is definitely medium rare. Yeah.
Don't get me thinking about our almost rumble at Ruth's Chris. I won't go over that story yet again. But Matt, I'm going to toss this back to you, because Bloom and I talked about it in the preview show. The Browns have ran the ball, obviously, and your stuff on Nick Chubb, and just your stuff in general, obviously, just outstanding as always. But in looking at your recent Nick Chubb piece and looking at how he's so nuanced and everything that he does, right? Best running back in the league, whatever you want to say, right there. The Browns, though, if they wanted to against the Ravens, because Bloom and I kind of went back and forth on this in the preview show today. It's like, well, against the Ravens, you could see how they'd want to shove Chubb down their throat, and just be a more physical game. But do they try to zig when everybody's zagging and go to pass it with Baker coming off his big hot performance? How do you think they're going to attack Baltimore? With a lot of fantasy GMs, that'll be fantasy playoff spots and, proceeding on in your fantasy playoffs. That'll be coming down on Monday night.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to how they think defenses will play them. And will these defenses, you look at the Tennessee Titans, and they were weak in terms of, they have kind of a weak secondary, weak zone type of look. And I think they felt confident that they could start off with play action and use that based on the tape that people have looked at, and be able to find those open creases where it's basically, play action, linebackers suck up, and you have these huge pockets to be able to throw the ball. I don't think it's going to be as easy against the Ravens, and the Ravens can play a little bit more man-to-man. That means they can kind of load up the box a little bit more too, and they can be, and I think that they can blitz a little bit more and do a little bit more with their pressure packages. So if you ask me, I think they're going to still be, their game plan is going to be pretty similar to what they like to do normally, which is run the ball down their throat. I think that, you look at someone like Brandon Thorne, who does excellent work with his trench warfare, site. And I was just reading something the other day talking about Gary Kubiak's influence on blocking schemes. And one of the things that they like to do is they're pretty consistent about this is how we're going to run things. And that's where Kevin Stefanski is influenced by. And I think that what you're going to see is they want to be able to wear the Ravens out a bit. And I think that part of that comes with the play action game. But listen, I mean, they were able to run the ball with Nick Chubb for the past 3 meetings. I think they're going to be able to continue to do that. I think that when you look at what Mayfield did, he didn't screw up. And I think he had a great game in the box score. But when you look at what happened, there was no pressure in the pocket. There were wide open receivers. He hit wide open receivers. I think the Ravens are a team that is not going to make it that easy for a quarterback just to do his job. They're going to make him do more than what's, the basic requirements of being an NFL quarterback. And that's where Baker Mayfield gets tested.
Bloom, any change in stance from this morning? Again, it's Thursday morning, so we're kind of wrapping stuff up for the week. Any different thoughts tonight, especially based off what Matt just said?
Well, I'll just say that I still think that Nick Chubb is your unstoppable force here, and he's even when it's coming at this time of year, you're happy to have Nick Chubb. I do think, for me, Cease, one of the tells was Stefanski saying there aren't many plays that work against the Ravens. Which
and that wasn't gamesmanship, you don't think?
It is gamesmanship. And I think what he's kind of wink, nudging is he has some things that he thinks is going to work. He has some plays that he's ready to unveil. And will they work? I don't know. But when you see how the timing and sequencing of the play calls has been so good. Now, this isn't the Titans defense. It's a great game. I'm really looking forward to this. You heard the rhetoric from the Browns today. We're a very different team than we were in week 1. We understand the schemes. We understand what we're doing a lot more. And I think it creates a lot of suspense for this one. So I'm excited. And as always, in these games, the screws turn a little tighter. We learn a little more about the coaches and the players and where these teams are headed. And I think there's a wide range of outcomes for this one.
Go ahead, Matt.
If Jarvis Landry keeps throwing the ball, I think they'll be okay.
Drawing rough in the passer penalties.
Okay, Matt. I think Minnesota and Tampa can be a shootout. I believe the over-under is 51, and I would take the over on that. And I'm not a gambling man, but if I was, I'm expecting a fantasy bonanza of points. Now, the Evans injury is interesting. We talked to Dr. Jene about that. Obviously getting a lot of Ronald Jones questions this week, and people looking at Chris Godwin, had the pins removed. What's he do there? Should be a fine Gronk week, as we've chronicled. I think all the way through the waiver wire show, Bloom. We've been talking about, hey, it's Todd Davis, ladies and gentlemen. Gronk's going to eat him up, spit him out. Okay, so yeah, I'm expecting the Bucs to show some of that fight. I'm expecting Minnesota, though, to come out and put up some points, obviously, whether they do it with Dalvin Cook or not, because they have 2 top 5 fantasy receivers in Thielen. And Justin Jefferson, the way he's playing is outstanding. Let's chronicle that and stay on this game, because we do have a question from Craig I want to get to here. What up, Craig? Get up, Craig, in the chat room. But just, Matt, I want your thoughts on Justin Jefferson, because we all knew slot receiver, 109 of his 111 catches were out of the slot last year. And we know 2 years ago he had struggled beating the jam at the line of scrimmage when LSU asked him to play outside. Well, this season he's playing all over the place and obviously balling out. So what have you seen? Do you feel the same way about Bucs Vikings as I do, that it could be quite high scoring? And then let's get your thoughts on Jefferson and what you've seen this year compared to what you saw on film and your expectations as a rookie.
Yeah, well, to start off with the game, I mean, I agree with you that I think it can be a very high-scoring game as long as Kirk Cousins doesn't get into a funk early, because he's a little bit streaky at times.
Yeah,
and if he can stay on his game, early enough that doesn't get away from them, they can be in it at the end, and they can be scoring a lot of points with that team. Especially because I think the Bucs defense, that's their biggest hope, is pressure. They can send David, they can send White, Shaq Barrett, and the rest of that cast, and do things to kind of put the offense on notice a little bit. They hampered Aaron Rodgers a bit, a number of weeks ago, because of their ability to get pressure like that. But That's saying I do think that it will be a high-scoring game. Obviously, the Vikings can't stop anybody right now, and their best player is going to be on the bench, obviously, with that calf injury and Eric Kendricks. So, like you said, Todd Davis on Gronk. Yeah, come on. So there's that. And I think even if Evans is out, you can take Scott Miller out of mothballs. And he has a great connection with Tom Brady. The biggest worry with Tom Brady is what Mark Schofield's chronicled on my podcast this week, which is that Bruce Arians has basically said, let's do things my way. So the way that we're going to read things on the field and do different hots and different types of hot reads are done in a different way than what Tom Brady's used to. So kind of the 20 years of muscle memory on I would normally hit Gronk on this hot read. Well, now it's a crossing route to a different receiver, and he's going to ends up looking by mistake to Gronk, who's covered, and now he's wasted a look, and now he's got to throw the ball away. So if they can get that kind of fixed, and even though you got to wonder why Arians just didn't say, Tom, I'll do whatever you say. You're a 20-year player. Let's just do your thing, instead of fight this as much as he has.
Yeah,
maybe this would be a better team. But going back to this, I think it will still be high scoring. That we saw early on that the Buccaneers have played pretty darn well on offense at times. It's just been streaky at points. Justin Jefferson, listen, one of the savviest players I watched last year, one of my favorite players, because you felt like he could do both. Now, the point that you made about him having difficulty against the jam and, early on, 2 years ago, that makes sense. That's fine, and that's one of those things that I think that as we look at, it's about how much of vocabulary do you have in terms of being able to use different moves? How do you develop it? Who'd you face? And I think that in the long run, what you see with the guy is that he's a smart player. And if you're a smart player who plays a one step ahead, you usually develop those parts of your game. And when you watch him with the way he ran option routes, with the way that he could go up and win the ball on the perimeter, show the boundary awareness he did, and then block. This was a guy who was blocking like Florida defensive ends and University of Florida linebackers. And you look at him now, like in his uniform, and he looks like a half pound away from Randy Moss in terms of being a rail. But when you watched him at LSU, you're like, this dude is like holding his own as a lead blocker, in the same way that we're watching Josh Reynolds right now lead block for Cam Akers and open up creases. And it's like, when you see that out of a player, you know that this guy has an all-around game, and he has a sixth sense in the open field. So watching him, just ball out all around has been fantastic. And it's been a great fit in Minnesota, where I think a lot of people feared, just like with A.J. Brown a couple years ago, oh, is he a good fit in this team? Because they already have Adam Thielen, and where's he going to play? And it's like, no, they're going to move him around, and it's fine. And they've been able to do that, and he's been able to win against top cornerbacks. So, if you have him, you have yourself a top 3 receiver in this class, maybe the top receiver in this class, even long term. And certainly, I'm doing my dynasty rankings for my subscribers, and I have him. I have him easily in my top 5 of players over the past 3 years of classes, and feel good about that moving forward.
I hate to ask where you have Jerry Jeudy. Bloom, should we have expected Arians to fight this? Like, when you look back on it now, and Matt brought it up, like, why is Arians fighting this? Why doesn't he just go to Brady? But it's BA, bro.
Right.
It's BA. So were we kind of blind to this? You know what I mean?
There it is.
Were we blind as Matt gets his popcorn? Well,
yeah.
Because when you step back and you go, oh, well, yeah, it's BA. But when we're in the moment, we're like Brady and Arians and oh my God, and everything's great. And then it's not great. And we're like, oh yeah, because Bruce Arians isn't going to bend to anybody.
Well, I don't think this was something that was easy to see coming. Okay. Again, I'll remind folks, I don't know if it was 4, 5, 6 years ago, one of those Patriots Super Bowl years, there was a great New York Times profile of him that was published in between, like that week in between. And what was fascinating is he's not really an alpha. He likes to follow gurus. He's got like Alex Guerrero. Right. I think Giselle is one of his gurus. Belichick, McDaniels, He's not an alpha. So when he goes down to Tampa, and what we hear is it will be a Bruce Arians offense with Tom Brady input. And it was packaged by all of the national beat writers saying, this isn't Peyton going to Denver. This isn't Peyton bringing his offense. This isn't Brady bringing his offense with him. Let's take this at face value. And all the rhetoric was Brady saying, tell me what to do. Here I am, coach. What are we going to do? So it seemed to me like it was going to be pretty harmonious in that Arians was going to remain. And the other thing is, outwardly, Arians' personality is very strong. He's not going to step back. I think maybe where things started to go wrong was, bringing Gronk out of retirement, then this Antonio Brown move midseason. And I don't think those are Arians' moves. Arians said he doesn't want Antonio Brown. He knew him from the days back in Pittsburgh. He said, I don't want Antonio Brown. So I think that kind of tug of war where you wonder, is the owner getting involved? That might be where the cracks started to show. And also maybe the way that Arians called him out publicly and said, Brady just isn't playing well. I bring up my 84-year-old father, Sigmund Bloom. And he's not happy right now because Mike Tomlin is calling the team out publicly. He feels like that's for behind closed doors.
Keep it in-house, right?
Right.
Old school.
So you don't know if that added friction. I think it caught us all, I don't want to say by surprise, but you got popcorn out, whenever we saw Arians saying, well, Brady's not having any trouble completing these plays in practice, so I don't know what's going on. I think that's...
Maybe he's confused by the coverage.
Yeah. So, and again, there's that nugget, I think it was Stephen Ruiz dug up, that Belichick would spend a lot of his week helping Brady prepare for the opposing defense when they were together, like we're talking 2007, 2008, 2009. So there's a lot of moving pieces here, but I think Matt really sums it up by getting the popcorn out. This is going to be a fantastic game this weekend, and we'll see where we go from there with this Tampa team. They basically have I think they probably will get into the playoffs in some way, shape, or form, but they really have a month to get on the same page and all pull in the same direction. And I think in the locker room, because Cecil, you've been the one to bring up a few times that the locker room isn't really taken to Brady and his style and his way of composing himself.
No, they don't really like his mannerisms.
Yeah.
So Matt, when the locker room, and again, this is like Ndamukong Suh, right? And Shaq Barrett and all these guys, top defenders, and Brady's sitting there throwing a fit, and they're just like, whatever. Like, how's this working out?
Well, it's interesting because you wonder. I was kind of shocked. First of all, I want to apologize to any fantasy people who missed their playoffs because of the fact that they followed me down the road of Tampa Bay's going to actually have a chance to be like Denver, even not year two, but still be like pretty darn good in that respect, because I was definitely high on that respect of those guys and would have loved to have learned a little bit more about some of the narratives that Bloom talked about there. Makes me wonder, though, because when you think of Tom Brady, I do think of an alpha. I think of a guy who told the owner, I'm going to be your starting quarterback one day, that type of story, and the fire that he does show. But maybe he's a little on the passive aggressive side, maybe he's and so maybe because to me,
nobody likes that guy, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're a bit of a people pleaser and you wind up being passive aggressive, then you turn out into a situation where you're like, I'll do whatever you want to do. But can we bring Rob Gronkowski in? I'll do whatever you want to do. But can we bring Antonio Brown in, despite the fact that Scotty Miller's playing better than Antonio Brown before him? Can we bring all these guys in and disrupt the chemistry of a great passing game that was there if you had a quarterback who didn't throw it to the opposing team? I mean, that was like, you had it ready made. I mean, and I'm sure Peyton Manning's like, it just give me like 25% more arm strength than I do right now, and I'd still be playing right now. I'd outplay Tom Brady. Maybe that's part of it, is that you have Bruce Arians who's like, here it is. I'm going to be in your face and tell you exactly what I think. And then you have Tom Brady who's like, aw, shucks, I'll do whatever you say, but then like come around the back door and basically try and manipulate things as opposed to being straightforward. I don't know if he's that way. Exactly. There you go. And and we know Peyton wasn't that way. First day, you're talking about early days of practice, basically ripping Demaryius
The
Thomas.
first day and the second rep that he threw Demaryius Thomas a pass, he started dropping F-bombs.
Yeah, exactly.
The second pass he ever threw to Demaryius Thomas.
And we know that Peyton Manning was the offensive coordinator in Indianapolis anyway.
We know
it
wasn't Adam Gase.
Yeah,
we know it was Adam Gase in Denver.
Right. And he was a teacher too, which was the thing that folks respected about him, is that he taught. So he could get in your face and drop F-bombs, but he was going to show you the right way to do it. Sounds like Tom Brady maybe is just more about avocado ice cream and dropping F-bomb.
Did you see the TB12 food, by the way? It looks terrible. Terrible.
That means it's great for you, right?
Must be. It looks like brown gruel.
Okay, well, Craig wants to know, guys, is this the week that AB breaks out? Great matchup, and Evans is hobbled. Or Bloom, you brought up Scotty Miller.
Yeah.
Matt brought him up too. Is that the GPP play, right?
Right.
A little DFS talk tonight, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, well, see, we talked about this on the preview show. What's fascinating here is it's coming out of the bye, so you have a chance to reassess priorities. And they had already said going into the bye that Scott Miller is getting healthier and he's going to be a bigger part of the offense. So his snaps either come at the expense of Antonio Brown or Cameron Brate, basically. And this is where the power struggle comes in, because they're 1-3 with Antonio Brown out there. So and we saw Brady and Miller have tremendous chemistry. So I do think that I would, if you're looking for that big breakout kind of game, I'd expect it more from Miller than from Brown. And to be honest, I feel like the Antonio Brown we watched has lost a step. Not that he can't still get open in the short area, but he's not getting away. He's not creating a lot of separation. He's creating enough separation to get these 7 and 8 yard catches. And I think that's not what is going to make this offense work. And frankly, Scott Miller was doing more with those short passes too. So it's going to be a Rob Gronkowski week anyway. That's your GPP play. With Eric Hendricks banged up, I think this is a Brady to Gronk game. But it's also going to be a Cousins to Jefferson and a Cousins to Thielen. And maybe Cousins to Irv Smith. Didn't get a chance to ask Dr. Gene about that, but we'll have him back Sunday morning.
Matt, AB week or no?
No, because he's overthinking things. So if he's a step slow, it's not because he's slowed down. It's just that he's thinking just like Tom Brady's having to think. And when you're thinking on the field, you're a half step to a step slow.
Okay. Another one from Craig, a great one here in the chat room. React to me, as he says it is a Broncos show. Jerry Jeudy is unhappy. Now, I can't talk, but I can tell you things if you listen to what I say. Jerry Jeudy and others, and it's those in the know what's coming to the surface. Okay. There is a growing frustration with a player who, maybe likes to dance. There is a growing frustration with a player who only reads one side of the field. There is a growing frustration with a guy that never changes his mistakes. There's a growing frustration with a player that regularly says the same thing every single week. So with Jerry Jeudy coming out on Twitter and then having to delete his tweets about how at least I got my conditioning in, and then about the Pat Shurmur stuff, like this is just a dangerous combination. By the way, nobody's going anywhere except for Tom McMahon because he's the worst special teams coach in the history of the NFL. So no one's going anywhere. And Craig brings it up. Are you worried about Jerry Jeudy's long-term prospects? I mean, we're talking, Matt, and Justin Jefferson, you and I talking about the Senior Bowl on the way to the road trip, right, 6-hour Atlanta. And Jerry Jeudy is so gifted, so talented. And you have a run-heavy team in Minnesota that is feeding 2 top 5 fantasy wide receivers. You have a team in Denver that can't move the ball, that can't score, that doesn't have a quarterback that can understand concepts, let alone read a defense. And now his number one, arguably the best player on the Broncos, is mad. He's frustrated. They're not changing a thing. And I love the spin doctors this week who came through with like a breaking news, everybody. I've talked to my sources and Vic Fangio is not going anywhere. We already knew that. Okay. I talked to my sources. They said water's good for me. And by the way, Pat Shurmur's probably not going anywhere. Okay. Where's the level of concern with Jerry Jeudy's prospects, guys?
Well, I'll start. He dropped about 15 to 18 spots in my rankings for players from the past 3 years that I'll be putting out. So, listen, and a lot of it has to do with the scheme. You look at Drew Lock, and he's been enabled since high school. You know, this is a guy who essentially could throw the ball a mile. He could throw it a little bit off platform and move around. He didn't have to work extremely hard on having perfect technique with his mechanics. And as a result of that, understandably, high school coach was like, whatever, you know, I'll tell you what to do, but you're going to keep starting because you're way better than everybody else. Gets to Missouri, pretty much the same thing. We're going to be, you know, we're not shooting for national championships at Missouri. We just want to be good in the SEC.
It's because they were 1-9 against top 25 teams under Lock. 1-9.
Yeah, and you know why? Because he was good in these against those other teams, and then it's like he didn't do much with that in terms of technique, with footwork, all those things he was supposed to do. He didn't practice those things. And people might say, well, how do you know? Watch the film and you know, because it's just like someone who plays music and they don't practice their sound and do the hard work that they got to do to get a good sound. You can hear someone and go, they don't practice the things they're supposed to. You know, like you can listen to it within about 5 seconds and go, or watch a football player and go in 5 seconds ago, they don't work on their footwork because this is basic and they're not doing it. Now they're trying to do it against the University of Alabama and the University of Florida because they need to be quicker and get rid of the ball fast. And they look like the guy who's going, well, the dog ate my homework. Well, my mom, the power went out and I couldn't do my homework. I couldn't get that project done. And that's Drew Lock. Drew Lock has basically been, you know, a guy who's been enabled so much that he's got to really work on his game. And he's got to play catch up with things that he's not going to be able to play catch up with unless he really buckles down. So, and he haven't put a foot up his hind parts for him to do it. So when's it going to start? I don't think he's going to look around and go, oh, well, maybe I thought I was good enough to play in the NFL. I mean, that's the concern for this. And when you look at Jerry Jeudy as a result of this, and with Vic Fangio, every time I watch Jerry Jeudy, and I've been watching a lot of all 22 of him every week, trying to like look at him to see.
Watch him get open.
Yeah. Crossing routes. That's what they love to do with him is crossing routes, which is fine. He's a great zone route runner and he gets open on those, but it's not always the first read. So, you know, there's part of that. I do have concerns about his initial acceleration. He's very fast. He's really quick, but he doesn't have that great acceleration, which is why when you watch him at Bama, a lot of it, people were wowed by all those short area moves and all that great fancy footwork he did. Well, he had to do that in high school and college because that's how he got away from people. But in the NFL, you need flat out acceleration. He needs a little longer runway. So when you have him matched up one-on-one against deeper guys, he's not getting that separation. And I think that Drew Lock's not a trust thrower necessarily. It's more of a desperation thrower who throws it into tight coverage, and it's usually against the grain in a bad situation. But like he doesn't seem to throw those trust throws to Jeudy, who's not a big guy, and quarterbacks want those big guys to do that.
He throws those to Tim Patrick. Like imagine if Jeudy was with a technician. Imagine if Peyton Manning was still with the Broncos.
He's like Reggie Wayne to me. That's who I always thought he was. If you give him a great receiver opposite him and Reggie Wayne, and he's more of a Reggie Wayne technician, like you said, that's a perfect explanation with that. And that's because people compare him to Antonio Brown. I said, no, he's more Reggie Wayne. And if you can scheme him open more, he's going to deliver for you every time. But he's not that guy who's going to beat every situation. And I think people overplayed that because when you say Antonio Brown, you're like, Antonio Brown in his prime is like you have two guys cover him, and
it doesn't matter.
Going to win. Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Like Steve Smith back in the day. So Sig, about this Jeudy situation, dropping him in your rankings, and then we got to throw in the Shurmur thing.
Sure,
because I compared Jeudy to Odell Beckham Jr. and ODB coming out and saying about Pat Shurmur all sorts of nice things. And by nice, I mean not nice things. And by the way, Sean brings up something very important. Jeudy must be beyond frustrated because at Bama, they internalize all those feelings. So he's speaking out. He's being told to delete those tweets, or suggested anyway. Yeah. Bloom, this is disastrous.
It just tells me that you should, in dynasty leagues, when the off-season calendar starts, make an offer to the team that has Jeudy. Because I think that the perception of the change in his range of outcomes, career range of outcomes, is probably greater than the actual change. It may be rocky, and people are bringing up Matthew Stafford, and I think that there is that question of how bold of a move can Denver make. How honest are they going to be with themselves about Drew Lock? But that's still a 1 year window. And if you believe in Jeudy, I mean, look at Amari Cooper. Speaking of Alabama receivers, it worked out. It took a change of teams, but it worked out. So I still think that what Jeudy has is going to translate. It will take a rational team with at least, by NFL standards, average quarterback play to unlock that. But I think that everything looks so bleak right now is exactly the time that you can get in and just be patient, and eventually you'll get your reward, because that ability to run routes and separate is going to translate. He just needs the surroundings. And I mean, you do look at, say, like Carson Wentz as an example of how when there's just organizational failure around you, it can drag you down to that level. But I think it's so early to predict something like that for Jerry Jeudy.
Bloom, I watch a comic book show, Simple Man's Comics, and they do a 3 up, 3 down show. And you don't buy on the up. When something's up, you go in your collection and all those long boxes in that closet I got back there, and you go, oh, I got 3 copies of that. When it's down, that's when you buy. So time to buy Jeudy.
Yeah, I think so. And then, there was some talk about Rager in the chat room. If you're a Rager believer, this is a time to look at him. Yeah. We'll see. I mean, obviously, the players that the window closed are guys like, if you like KJ Hamler on the same team, another guy you can look at. Windows closed on Jefferson. Windows closed on Chase Claypool. CeeDee Lamb. We'll see. Windows probably closed on Brandon Ayuk if people are looking at his actual game logs and seeing how well he's doing. And kudos. There's an example of alignment. There's an example of drafting a player, seeing him clearly for what he can do, plugging him in a way to take advantage of what he can do. So I think that going through this class, this is the other thing that you're doing is you've got your to-do list when the season flips over, the calendar turns, and it's actually a very active time in dynasty leagues, and it is a time to maybe get some of those true buy low moves done.
And we will be doing our snorkel, scuba, submarine show. I got it right. Had to slow down. Coming up very soon. Very, very soon. As we get to the final 9 minutes of tonight's show. Matt, this is a huge topic. What's the matter with Carson Wentz? And what do you expect from Jalen Hurts?
Carson Wentz is, when you think, you got to go back to 2017, really into 2016, 2017. When he came out at North Dakota State, he played at a West Coast offense, and he was a guy that I think they thought could execute that kind of West Coast scheme. And it was just at the point where teams were starting to reconsider the college game and spread things out and maybe not, and use more RPOs and use more quick throws to spots. And they looked at Wentz at the end of the season of 2016, early 2017, where he struggled in those early phases, like late 2016, first month of 2017. And we're like, he can't drop more than 3 steps without his footwork being all awry. He can't throw. He can't hit a barn, when it comes to like passes over 40, 45 yards. He doesn't have that deep game. It's inconsistent. But what he has is great ability to be able to improvise. And he's good. And he's got a good enough arm that if he just gets his feet set early and gets rid of the ball, he can be accurate within 30, 35 yards. He just needs to get rid of the ball quickly. And if he can't get rid of the ball quickly, then he can buy enough time for somebody to drift behind the defense. And it doesn't matter how accurate he is because the receiver's just sitting there waiting on the ball. I mean, he doesn't have to throw it in stride. So they decided to do more of a spread offense. They had the offensive line to do. They had one of the best offensive lines in the league. They had a decent running game. They had good receivers who could fit all of that. And they had a strong enough defense. So when you put all that together, he had the surrounding talent to be good. And then in 2017, he really took off in that system because they could minimize his weaknesses in terms of the longer he stayed in the pocket and the more that he had to maneuver in the pocket within rhythm on longer developing plays, the less accurate he was. So they were able to hide it for a year and a half. He got hurt. The offensive line had injuries. You started to see injuries to the surrounding talent. And then last year, he started to get found out a little bit. And I think being found out means the fans found out. The team knew. I mean, how do you adjust this scheme and not know this guy can be good, but we really have to tailor this to Carson Wentz? And we love his grit. We love we love his playmaking ability, but he's not an all-around quarterback. He's not your typical prototypical elite passer that we might have hoped he'd become. So as a result of that, you look at this year and everything went downhill with the injuries, and it's exacerbated his weaknesses because teams have been able to force him to do things that they've always known he couldn't do. Now fans are out of denial about it, because if you said this in 2017 that they kind of made the scheme to minimize him, or 2018, people would say, no, he's great. You're nitpicking him. You're nitpicking
Right.
Carson Wentz.
Right.
No, it's just telling the truth about what's going on. So now they're seeing the truth. And the problem is that, when you see the truth and you see what happened, you rewarded him a big contract. Now the public's angry, and now they're like, and now the team's under pressure, especially the front office, and they need to save their jobs. And why would they draft a quarterback in the second round in Jalen Hurts if they didn't value him enough to consider him a possible developmental starter within a year or two?
It's funny how they love you until you get paid, right? That's almost a music thing. Like, people love Metallica until they got popular.
Now you
And
have
they're
to
like,
be, yeah.
Carson Wentz, they
machine.
loved him, and then he got paid, and it's like, well, why aren't you what we thought you were getting paid to be?
Yeah, why aren't you churning out top 3 seasons over and over again? And it's like, well, I need the help around me, but nobody's really talked about that. And he needs a little more help than your elite quarterbacks need. And I think that's the problem with this game. So when you look at Jalen Hurts, he's got better footwork moving around the pocket than Carson Wentz. He throws the deep ball with more accuracy than Carson Wentz does. He is someone who can run and break tackles a little bit more than Carson Wentz can. But he plays hero ball more than Carson Wentz does. And the longer he buys time, the more invested he is into a play, which can be a bad thing. He's kind of like, his mechanics are a little bit of a rudderless ship, or a rudder that's a little broken on with that back foot at times that can lead to some inaccuracies. And he doesn't have as much experience reading NFL defenses. So this could be disastrous against the Saints to some degree. And it's going to be a rough trial for him. But I think what the Eagles are looking at now is, we're probably going to have a competition between Jalen Hurts and Carson Wentz come 2021. And let the best man get that opportunity. And if neither of them work out, well, we can always look to the draft with a new GM and a new coaching staff, possibly, depending on who the scapegoats will be at that point.
Bloom's nodding his head.
Yeah. Well, because they're going to have like a top 6 pick, right? Maybe there's a third in that battle.
Maybe.
But you're right, and we got some good intel, and it sounds like I'm not going to. I won't give a specific nod, although you folks should know some of the smart people behind the scenes of Football Guys. It sounds like Howie Roseman has Jeffrey Lurie's ear. So if we're saying who's going to take the fall, then Peterson. But also watch Doug Peterson get snatched up right away if that happens.
Yes.
And this also is a moment for me to remind folks, Jene Bramel, the piece that she put out on SI about Jack Easterby, Actually, it starts out with a Game of Thrones reference. I was a Houston Texans player who used. Who do you think they compare Jack Easterby to in Game of Thrones?
Lannister. Or no,
Close.
Littlefinger.
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 Exactly. So there's a lot of this stuff going on in NFL organizations where
there's a lot of positioning in politics.
Yes.
Fangio's in with Joe Ellis.
Right.
Why is he not going anywhere? Because Joe Ellis loves him.
Right. So read the Easterby piece by Jene Bramel on SI.com just to get a picture not just of the Texans, but to understand what happens behind the scenes in these organizations and why things that seem inexplicable to us are explicable, even though they don't make any more sense when they're explained, but they are able to be explained when you understand how these power struggles go on, and know that Jack Easterby was one of the ones saying they need to trade that. We need to move on from that person. Who's that person in a sense? DeAndre Hopkins. So.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's right. That's right. By the way, Bloom, we're out of time, but
Yeah.
I wanted to do a show. I was thinking about this earlier today too, because my mind wanders. But I was like, Matt, you and me, at the end of the live show, not today, not tonight, but we should all take one item from our background and talk about it sometime.
Yeah.
And just a little show and tell, right? Because
Absolutely.
I'm looking at Matt's room. I'm like, what's that over there? Oh, tell me about that horn. Looking at your shelves. I'm like, what's that up there? Tell me about the flag. I got a ton of stuff on my shelves. So yeah. Well, football guys showing them. Yeah. See. Yeah. Okay. There you go.
We're complex.
Is there any game wrap at all? Is there any
Jarrett
game
Stidham's
thing?
in. Stiddy is in. That's all you need to know. Cooper Kupp caught a touchdown.
Fresh fish. For Aaron Donald.
All right, everyone. That is a wrap for tonight's program. It is the Audible Live. Follow us all on Twitter, on social networking. It is at Matt Waldman, at Jene Bramel, at Sigmund Bloom, at Cecil Lammey, and we're at the Audible as well. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for watching. Make sure to do all those YouTube things. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so that you never miss a vid. I'm Cecil Lammey. There's Matt Waldman, Sigmund Bloom. Stay tuned, be well, stay safe, and stay frosty.